For the occasion, her family has come together, and Rhea is given a gift by her son Nick, daughter Pia, and Nick's wife Sophie. Pia is dismayed to learn that Sophie chose to give her a planter rather than the bread maker she had requested. She calls Sophie's ideas dumb and sarcastic remarks. As a result of her disdain for his wife, Nick demands that she leave the party right away. Ethan and Kai, the sons of Nick and Sophie, stare in dread at the adult altercation. Pia departs inconveniently and enters a club. She dances wildly and consumes a lot of alcohol to block out the earlier events. Later, she is texting Woody, a man she met on a dating app, while she is in the club's restroom. When she gets up to flush the toilet, she unintentionally puts her phone in the bowl after texting him to meet her. At the scene that follows, she is in her apartment placing her phone in rice in order for it to absorb all the water and self-heal. She takes a car to her place of employment as a nurse the following day. She is helping a patient while he watches amusing movies online to pass the time. Pia's brother Nick can be seen holding up a card that reads, "I'm a street woman," in one of the videos. A different card that reads, "At 5 million views I die," is then held up by the speaker. He appears to be terrified and battered, as though someone is forcing him to hold the signs. Pia is stunned and unsure of what is happening. When she hurries to the hospital phone to call Nick, the call is immediately put on hold. She then attempts to reach Nick's wife Sophie, but she doesn't answer either. Pia panics and dashes to Nick's workplace. She then inquires about him from Matt, a colleague. He hasn't been seen since the morning, according to Matt. Matt is alarmed after Pia shows him the film, so he queries Dawn, another one of his co-workers, about Nick. He missed his meeting at 8 o'clock and hasn't yet arrived at work. The two learn. Pia hurries to the school where Sophie teaches since she is now more concerned than before. Even though the guards advise her not to, she enters anyhow. After removing the protection, Sophie sees the movie on her own. She watches it in shock, just like Pia. She claims that Nick went to work as usual in the morning and that the video is absurd. The two then report a missing person to the police. The number of views on Nick's video reaches 9,000 while they are traveling and then quickly rises. Roshan Armiri, a police detective, is in charge of the case. The detective probes them about Nick in depth, paying particular attention to the allegations of his sexual assault of women. While Pia is displeased, Sophie patiently responds to all of his inquiries. Despite appearing to be acquainted, she and Roshan don't do anything about it. When Sophie's oldest son Ethan calls, she returns home to be with them. When the boys watch the footage of their father, they become upset. Ethan is attempting to use the Find My Fam app on his iPad to see if it can locate Nick. His phone is off, thus the app is unable to determine his whereabouts. In just a few hours, the video had 300,000 views, and everyone called Nick a monster in the comments. The children are instructed to cease watching the video and to skip school temporarily by Sophie. When Pia gets back to her apartment, she discovers that her phone is now functional. Nick apologizes for their argument the day before and says he has to talk to her about certain things in a voicemail that she finds. Pia listens to the voicemail repeatedly while she travels to Andrea, her mother. Andrea denies speaking with Nick that day when the woman asks if she did. Pia decides not to inform her about the circumstance so she won't be concerned. She receives a text message from Sophie at that very moment urging her to come to the police station right away. There, the two learn that Nick has another video uploaded to the website. He is holding a card that reads, "I killed a woman," in this picture. Detective Roshan's rival Det, Sack Luka, gets brought to the investigation because the case has become one of homicide. Pia immediately realizes that the first two signs were written in Nick's handwriting, while the third one was not after watching the film. Luka queries the women about if Nick is a known aggressive person because he thinks the video might be a confession. He is told by a furious Sophie that Nick would never harm a person, man or woman. In response, Pia claims Nick is the victim and urges the investigators to act quickly before the video receives 5 million views. Pia shows Sophie the voicemail she received and asks if she should present it to the police as soon as they leave the police station with Sophie. Sophie, however, wants to keep the letter under wraps because Nick sounds contrite in it, which would hurt their cause given that the authorities already believe he is a murderer. As they are conversing, Sophie receives a call from a reporter requesting an interview. The call causes the two to become more anxious. The video has now received more than 1.5 million views. A worried Pia approaches her computer-savvy buddy Vince and requests that he locate Nick in some way. Vince claims that locating Nick is out of his hands, but he has set up a support where individuals from all around the world are looking into Nick's case and assisting in the search for him. Even though Pia doesn't think a simple website can discover her brother, she appreciates the assistance. A reporter approaches her as she approaches Nick's home later on. She is yelled at by Pia to leave the private property and she enters. She is confronted by a disgruntled Rhea for hiding Nick's disappearance from her. She apologizes and checks on Nick's son Ethan, who appears to be relaxed and amusing himself during the emergency. The video has garnered media attention by the time Pia returns to her apartment. Her hacker pal Vince appears out of nowhere carrying crucial information. By examining the symbols in the background, the individuals in the support were able to determine that the video was shot in a certain style of delivery van. As she delivers the evidence to the police, Pia thanks Vince. While Matt, Nick's co-worker, waits outside, they start to search through the traffic cameras for the precise van. She checks the website again after a while and discovers that there have been 5 million views. Just afterwards, Roshan and the policemen emerge from the building and announce that they have located the van. A SWAT squad arrives on the scene in a hurry, but when they arrive, they discover that the van is empty. They look all around but come up empty-handed. Finally, the police reach the conclusion that Nick was not present when the van was destroyed. Roshan is not included in the job assignments because he is not a member of the murder department and his skills are no longer required. Roshan is left out of the task assignments back at the police station. Luke asks him to go with Sophie to her house after Roshan tries to retaliate. The reporters surround Sophie outside of her home. She is led inside by Roshan to observe that the house is being searched for potential evidence. There are several police officers dispersed over the area searching for any big clues. The children inquire about Nick's whereabouts, and Sophie responds that he will return shortly. Right on cue, Lucas shows up to the house and confiscates everyone's phones so they can gather information that can aid them with the case. The family disputes the practice and claims they are being handled like suspects. All but Pia, who claims that her phone is at her apartment because it is damaged, hand over their phones. Pia goes outside to smoke in the midst of the hunt. Roshan stays behind her to talk. As the two converse, it becomes clear that they had been corresponding for a while via dating app. In truth, Pia had planned to meet Roshan before her phone fell into the toilet. She requests that he keep her informed of any developments in the case. Roshan says that despite coming from the missing person section, he was excluded from it. He advises that Pia ask the soldier to assign him the case, and Pia accepts. Later, as Roshan searches the home alone, he discovers Ethan using a tablet in his room. Ethan claims that it was an outdated tablet belonging to his father. Ethan insists he needs it to keep track of the search even though Roshan continues to ask for it to see if it contains anything significant. He tells how interest in Nick's case has increased to the point where an app called Genicking has been created specifically for his quest. People look for Nick via the app by visiting location in the city where he might be. Red markers on the map indicate the location that have already been searched. Roshan becomes intrigued by this and takes the tablet for himself. He then makes his way to the police station where he shows the sergeant the app. She opposes, however, enlisting the general public in the quest. Additionally, Roshan shows her the text messages that were taken from Ethan's phone and in which he discusses a significant altercation with his parents. Detective Lucas nears at Roshan as he leaves the sergeant's office and tells him to go home. Then, Roshan travels to a location that hasn't been geonicked, where he encounters two youngsters looking for Nick's body. Roshan attends the mosque and then his house without making any progress. His parents are proud of him for working on such a significant case and have seen him previously in the news. They inquire about his promotion to the homicide unit, but Roshan brushes the inquiry off. The next day, Sophie issues a formal statement to the media pleading with Nick's captors not to harm him. Pia shows Roshan the voicemail Nick left her prior to his abduction and later asks him to see her by himself in his car. Pia defends herself by claiming they may look through her phone now as Roshan gets upset with her for not giving them the information sooner. Pia doesn't know either, so he asks her what issue Roshan wanted to discuss with her. After that, Roshan informs the sergeant of the fresh information. He also admits to having dated Pia prior to Nick being missing. After that, when he goes back to his job, he discovers that his workspace has been covered in the images from his dating page. He is ridiculed by Luca for it. Roshan accuses him of treating him unfairly due of his religion, which incenses her. However, Luca responds that Roshan is not a team player and is utilizing the situation to advance his career. The following day, Nick's bicycle is discovered by the side of a remote road. The cops arrive quickly and look around the area. Soon, a nearby empty syringe is discovered. It was used to kidnap Nick, they conclude. Following the investigation, Sophie's mother Ruby welcomes Nick to her home where he is met by Sophie. He tells the family that Nick's bike has been located and requests a private meeting with Sophie. He inquires about Nick's message to Pia, in which she talks about their altercation the previous evening. Roshan then asks if there were any marital problems between Sophie and Nick before to his abduction. Uncomfortable with the inquiry, Sophie asserts that their relationship status has nothing to do with Nick's abduction. When Roshan senses something fishy, he directly asks the woman if she knows where her husband is. Sophie tells him to leave the house as she stares at him in shock. He then visits Pia's apartment where he discovers her using the geotagging app. When he inquires about her altercation with Nick, she ignores him. She eventually admits that although she and Nick are closer than most siblings, he has been acting strangely for a while. She called him out on it, which led to their altercation. She further says that he came to her on March 16th with injuries and asked her to hide them from Sophie. The geotagging app indicates that Nick's body has been found as they converse. Roshan and Pia sprint over to where Nick's body is being surrounded by others. Closer inspection reveals that the body is actually only a mannequin with Nick's face painted on it as a prank. After the event, Matt, Nick's co-worker, is waiting for Pia outside her apartment when Roshan drops her off there. As Roshan departs in his car, she and Matt enter. The detective utilizes the Find My Family app at night to determine Nick's whereabouts on March 16th. When he learns he was in a pub, he goes to see the proprietor the next day. He learns from the CCTV tape that Nick had a confrontation with an unidentified individual that day. Later, he summons Pia to the police station where he plays the fight's footage for her. Pia gives a sigh of relief that they have a lead at last and thanks Roshan for his diligent effort on the investigation. After Pia has left, Roshan discusses the geotagging with Luca, who initially rejects him but then decides to conduct a search. When they finally arrive in the woods via an abandoned road, Roshan discovers Nick's decomposing corpse in a nearby river. The next scene shows Roshan approaching Pia at her apartment and informing her of the discovery of the body. Even though Pia had foreseen this, she sobs on the floor in sorrow over her brother's passing. Roshan enters the police station the following day to cheers. He gets promoted by the sergeant to the homicide unit, and even Luca commends him for his excellent job. Then he assists his colleague in navigating Sophie's social events. While at work, Roshan finds a photo of Sophie and a man who resembles the man Nick fought at the pub. Roshan, who is astonished, double-checks and determines that it is the same individual. The next scene shows Sophie in the police department. She receives official word of her husband's passing from Roshan. After hearing the news, she goes limp and asks the detective how he passed away. Luke admits that he suffered head damage, however the cause hasn't been determined yet. She cries one tear and asks them to identify the culprit. Then, after showing her the video of Nick's altercation with the man, Luca queries Sophie about knowing the man. She lies and claims she doesn't, which surprises everyone. She is then given a photo of the two of them. Finally, Sophie acknowledges that the man is Curtis Hamilton, a former co-worker. After her first deception, the detectives find it difficult to believe her when she says they are merely friends and co-workers. She invites her entire family to the table after she gets home. The kids are finally told that their father won't be coming home. They all started crying as they mourn Nick's passing. The next thing we see is Pia pleading with Roshan at the police station to allow her to see her brother's body. She can't see him, though, until after the autopsy. Back at home, Sophie informs her mother that the police have been asking her about Curtis. Her mother looks at her in shock when she admits that she only referred to him as a friend. It is obvious that there was interaction between the two. Sophie sobs, claiming it will be her fault if Curtis is found to have killed Nick. Pia arrives at the house as they are having a conversation and asks to spend the night. While inviting her, Sophie withholds all information regarding Curtis. The previous anniversary of Nick and Sophie's marriage is then flashed back to. They had a party, which they thoroughly liked. But by the time it was over, Sophie had received a text from Curtis saying that he was thinking about her non-stop. Sophie glanced over the text and her expression shifted. She revealed her 3-month relationship with Curtis that evening. Nick was indignant with her. Sophie slips out of the home to visit Curtis in the present. She walks in, and he is startled to see her. He acknowledges Sophie's current circumstances and inquires as to how she is doing. Instead, Sophie presses him to explain why he met Nick without telling her. Curtis responds that Nick unexpectedly messaged him and requested them to meet at the pub. He asked Curtis to go into great depth about their connection, including who showed interest first, how they first met, and how frequently they made out. He says Nick attacked him by the time the conversation was over, but Sophie doubts him. As they converse, the cops arrive at his home and take Curtis into custody. It comes out that they had been tracking Sophie ever since she had lied about her connection. Then, as suspects in Nick's murder, Curtis and Sophie are both taken to the police station. Thank you for watching. Why don't you consider subscribing while you're here? We have the best recaps around and would love to have you part of our community. Thank you and see you in the next one.